Hi friends, today I'm going to review the book Regaining Yourself, Breaking Free from the Eating Disorder Indentity by Ira M. Introducing eating disorders. Having an eating disorder is not a choice, so how does it start? Ironically enough, many eating disorders begin with a person's desire to be healthier. People wish to lose a few pounds and get in shape, so they begin dieting and exercising. At first, their friends reinforce their efforts by complimenting them. The physical changes in their bodies are emotionally gratifying, but for a few people, particularly those with tendencies toward perfectionism and anxiety, the dieting takes over. They begin to restrict their caloric intake more and more and increase the time they spend exercising. Weight loss calms their anxiety. Semi-starvation creates changes in metabolism and brain chemistry that generate a natural high. And an eating disorder is born. Different types of disorders. The name eating disorder covers several different conditions. Eating disorders don't start overnight, although they can progress quickly once they take hold. In most cases, the illness comes on slowly and quietly, unnoticed. People manifest anorexia nervosa two ways. Restricting types severely limit their intake of food. Binge eating and purging types eat large amounts of food, and then purge by vomiting or overusing laxatives. Binging and purging, also referred to as bulimia, often is not marked by severe weight loss. In fact, bulimics are often of normal weight. Some bulimics do not purge, instead they exercise. People with exercise bulimia binge and then exercise obsessively in an effort to burn calories. You don't have to be underweight to have an eating disorder. Eating disorders also show up in two kinds of overeating problems. Binge eating disorders, BED, are distinguished by uncontrolled overeating, although it is not followed with purging. Compulsive overeating is similar to a food addiction, where patients use eating to sublimate, avoid, or deny emotional problems. Sometimes therapists also make use of the diagnosis eating disorder not otherwise specified, or ED-NOS. This label often is attached to patients who have some sort of eating disorder that does not fall into a clearly defined category. The problem with this diagnosis is that lay people tend to think it means that the eating disorder does not exist. Children who grow up seeing constant dieting, constant concern about weight, and constant working out absorb the messages that food is the enemy and appearance is all. Eating disorders are an equal opportunity problem. When anorexia nervosa first drew the eye of the media, it was considered an ailment of young, rich women. Although the majority of eating disorder sufferers are in this demographic group, other segments of the population are catching up. About 25% of the people diagnosed with an eating disorder are children, older women, or men from all economic brackets and ethnicities. Reading the signs. A patient often has an eating disorder for months or even years before relatives or friends notice. Sometimes this is because the person with the disorder becomes very adept at masking his or her appearance and symptoms. Distinguishing between healthy dieting and exercising and an eating disorder is hard, particularly for unknowing observers. And once family and friends do become alarmed, getting the person with the disorder to consent to therapy can take a long time. Parents and others have trouble associating the idea of a problem with someone who always seems so problem-free. However, people with eating disorders exhibit clear symptoms, including 1. Talking obsessively about diet, food, weight, and appearance. 2. Becoming mother's little helper. By clearing plates, doing dishes, cooking, serving, and fetching, people with eating disorders draw attention away from the amount they eat. 3. Developing eating rituals. 4. Undergoing a drastic physical change and being preoccupied with appearance. 5. Wearing baggy, oversized clothes to keep warm and conceal the body. Experiencing mood swings and emotional instability. 7. Exercising excessively and fidgeting constantly. 8. Drinking lots of water, coffee or diet soda, or eating only leafy greens and carrots. Anxiety, perfectionism, and OCD. Anxiety, an overpowering but undefined feeling of dread and agitation, is common in people with eating disorders. People who suffer anxiety often try to cope by doing everything perfectly. However, perfectionism causes its own problems. People who set unnecessarily high standards seldom take pride in their accomplishments. Instead, they constantly raise the bar until it becomes impossible to leap. When an obsessive identity joins anxiety and perfectionism, you have fertile ground for an eating disorder. Anxious perfectionists find that eating is the one thing they have the power to control absolutely. Inside, however, they feel a constant anxious refrain. I'm not good. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, is another psychological problem that can stem from anxiety. Not all patients with OCD suffer eating disorders, but patients with eating disorders almost always have obsessive personalities. They also tend to have underdeveloped identities. Instead, eating disorders become their identities, a problem that is rooted in their obsessive behavior. Understanding the similarities between OCD and eating disorders makes them much less inexplicable and mysterious. You are what you don't eat. People with eating disorders lose their own identities and become the eating disorder. Most people begin to develop an individual sense of identity at a young age. However, those with eating disorders often have missed this developmental stage. Since their inner ability to identify fails them, they take their cues from the outside world. They need positive reinforcement and approval to know that they are performing well. Because this false identity requires constant reinforcement, they become anxious that others will discover that they are frauds. When these high achievers develop eating disorders, they do it perfectly. They become the illness. It becomes their individual identity. Perfectionists will judge their body image by the more unrealistic standards set by the society around us. By the endless media images of so-called perfect bodies, everything that an eating disorder patient does is somehow related to the illness. Sufferers isolate themselves. They work out but don't participate in team sports. They dismiss enjoyable pastimes like reading, listening to music, socializing, and going to the movies as time wasting. They lose the concept of fun. However, these seemingly unproductive activities are important ways that people explore their identities and learn more about themselves, their potential, and their talents. The individual with an eating disorder sees herself as a performer on a stage, acting a role and seeking approval from the audience. Therapists should encourage patients to pursue their passions and, by doing so, find and adopt healthier identities. When patients begin to discover their true identities, the inner voice of the eating disorder begins to recede. Eating disorders give the illusion of control. Replacing that illusion with something real is at the center of effective therapy. If a person with an eating disorder can learn to follow his or her passion, that pursuit will begin to take up the space formerly occupied by the eating disorder. Little by little, the eating disorder identity will give way to a healthier, balanced identity. Recovery. The process. The first step in combating an eating disorder is admitting you have one. Generally, people vehemently deny that they are afflicted. They argue that it is a lifestyle choice or that they still feel fat. Even when they admit the problem, they might resist change or be unable to change. The patient must answer 3 questions before therapy can begin. 1. How serious are you about wanting treatment? 1. How serious are you about wanting to stop the eating disorder behaviors? 1. Are you an immediate threat to yourself or others? Individuals with eating disorders often feel as though they have no real identity of their own. To work effectively, a therapeutic relationship must be based on ultimate trust and a willingness to change. Therapy works best when a patient's family, friends, and community are involved in a positive way. Then the patient must focus on getting well. Unfortunately, for people with eating disorders, getting well means that they'll lose the attention they received for their disorder. They may look fat, which feels out of control, and they'll have to rejoin the real world. Personal interactive rational therapy. Author Dr. Ira M developed an approach to treating eating disorder patients called Personal Interactive Rational Therapy, PIART. Personal stands for a mutual therapeutic relationship based on honesty, partnership, acceptance, and open conversations. The therapist needs this relationship to get to know the person behind the eating disorder. In interactive therapy, the doctor is not a blank slate, asking questions and sharing nothing. Instead, the therapy is an exchange between 2 people, one of whom is trained to deal with eating disorder patients. The goal is to move the discussions past food, weight, and looks, and toward passion and interests. When people with eating disorders discover their passions, they discover their own true selves, and the eating disorder self starts to lose its control over them. Patients with eating disorders have an irrational inner voice. The rational part of their therapy teaches them to recognize that this inner voice is unreasonable and to learn how to listen to the rational part of their thinking. For instance, people with eating disorders can be hypersensitive to the most innocuous remark. If someone says, "You look nice today," the irrational mind hears, "You've gained weight." Eating disorder patients are very sensitive to the people around them. They'll pick up on unexpressed emotions, unspoken disapproval, and false attitudes instantly. People with eating disorders tend to suffer anxiety, and learning how to become rational about that is another core issue. Patients might not even recognize the symptoms of anxiety. such as a faster heartbeat or a feeling of nervousness or uneasiness. When they feel these symptoms, the irrational inner voice leads them to thoughts about food and their bodies. Therapy helps them recognize anxiety and learn to live with it. The biggest mistake for any patient to make is to stop treatment once the weight normalizes and they convince others, "I'm fine now." Slips, lapses, relapses, and collapses. Therapy is a long, rocky process marked by advances amid setbacks. These setbacks fall into 4 categories: slips, lapses, relapses, and collapses. A slip is an irrational, eating disorder-related. A lapse is a brief action based on the eating disorder. A relapse is a return to eating disorder behavior. Where a lapse is a stumble, a relapse is a fall. True perfection is the ability to accept our own imperfections. A collapse is a prolonged, full-scale return to the eating disorder behavior. Stressful or disturbing events, which are called triggers, cause setbacks. Therapy helps patients identify their triggers. Triggers could include having a job interview, failing a test, losing a job, breaking up a romance, the death of a loved one, and even positive events such as a graduation, marriage, or promotion. I don't want to protect my patients from life stresses. I want them to learn to navigate within them. Eating disorders affect all kinds of people, regardless of age, gender, religion, education, privilege, or ethnicity. The most effective way to combat an eating disorder is to discover your passion and your real identity by way of a therapeutic process based on mutual trust and a willingness to change. Therapy must be interactive to be productive. Finally, treatment must go beyond food and weight issues and come to include body, mind, and soul. Takeaways. 1. Eating disorders often originate from the desire to become healthier. 2. Eating disorders include anorexia nervosa, binge eating and purging, exercise bulimia, and compulsive overeating. 3. In addition to young women, eating disorder patients include children, men, older women, and people from every ethnic background. 4. Eating rituals, mood swings, excessive exercise, a change in weight, and preoccupation with appearance are all symptoms of eating disorders. 5. Anxiety, perfectionism, and an obsessive personality make fertile ground for the growth of an eating disorder. 6. People with eating disorders often vigorously deny that they have problems. 7. People with eating disorders lose their identities and become the eating disorder. 8. In therapy, patients discover their passions and, in doing so, adopt healthier identities. 9. PERT, Personal Interactive Rational Therapy, is based on interactive treatment. 10. Recovery is a long, bumpy process marked by advances and setbacks. 10. Patients aren't cured just because they gain or lose weight. 11. Did you know that around 70% of our viewers haven't subscribed to our channel yet? If you're one of them, why not consider hitting that subscribe button? It's a great way to stay up to date with our latest videos and support our channel at the same time. Join the majority of our community and subscribe today. Thanks for watching.